In this video, we complete step 18, column slices. So we are going to handle one additional case for column selection when we're doing row and column simultaneous selection. And that's the case when column selections are slices. So all three of these selections over here on the right hand side where I have my mouse hovering over are column selections that involve slicing. So all of these have the slice notation for the column selection part. So we are going to allow the slices to either have integers or strings in them. So if column selections have integers, like here, they will be exclusive of the very last one. And that's exactly what Pandas does. So for instance, this first slice will go up to but not including index 3. Whereas slices that do include column names as strings will be inclusive of the last one. So in this case, if F happens, F will be included as long as it's a multiple of 2. So this is the step, of course, of the slice. All right. So if we look back up here, we're still in this getItemTuple method. So we've handled all the cases for row selection for our data frame. So we've handled the case whenever the row selection is an integer, a data frame, or a list, or a slice. So we're done with all those cases. If it's not any of those cases, we will raise a type error. For the column selection, we've handled the case whenever column selection is an integer, a string, or a list. Now we're going to handle one final case, and that's whenever column selection is a slice. So the column selection has three attributes: start, stop, and step. So I'm going to go ahead and define three variables within inside here that are simply equal, take on the same name as those attributes of a slice. So start, stop, and step, I'm going to make separate variables for them, so it'll be easier to handle. Okay, so that's what this does right here. We're going to define new variables with the same name to hold those attributes. Okay, so before I get any further, it says if column selection is not a slice, raise a type error. So let's step out of this this branch right here. So let's end this. So if it's not an integer, string, list, or slice, then we will raise a type error and say column selection must be one of those. Must be int, string, list, or slice. Okay, so that'll handle that. So continuing, if start is a string, reassign it to its integer index amongst the columns. So let's check. So if in the case that we do have a string here, we are going to go ahead and reassign it to the integer index where it's at, and this will become more apparent later on. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say that if start is a string, and we're just going to go ahead and get its index. So we're going to reassign it. That's what this says. We're going to reassign it to the integer index. So start dot index. Oh, excuse me. So we're going to find the column number here. So we're going to find its index. Okay, so the columns is a list, and we'll simply get the index of that start. Now, with stop, we're going to reassign it to the integer index again, but we're going to add 1 since we're going to include the stop column if it is a string. So we're going to add 1 to the stop one. So let's go ahead and do this. So if stop is also a string, if stop is a string, then we'll do a reassignment. So we're going to get the index of this. And we'll just add 1 to this. All right. Now, we're not going to check the step. We're going to assume our users have given us a correct step, which should be an integer or just will be left blank, as it is in most cases. And when it's not given, it's just the step size is going to be 1 by default. So We won't mess around with that. We'll just hope the user gives us a correct step. So start, stop, and step should now be integers. This is not entirely true. Step could be anything, but we'll just assume it's the default in B1. So now we're going to reassign column selection as a list. So now that start, stop, and step are integers, we're going to reassign column selection. We're going to go ahead and grab columns again, and we're going to do start. We're going to give it stop and step. So we're going to go ahead and slice the columns for exactly what we need here, and this will get us the correct column selection as a list of the columns we want. So we simply broke down start, stop, and step. If they were strings, we changed them to integers. We use those integers, start, stop, and step, in our slice notation of the columns, and that will allow us to choose column selection as a list, which is what our little for loop requires. So we need column selection to be a list of the strings of the exact columns that we want. So that looks like that should work. If start is an integer, we're not going to go into this branch. So it'll just go directly here. If stop is an integer, it'll just go here as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at, let me exit out of here. Let's go ahead and look at this in action and see if we can get this to work. So here again we have our data frame. So let's slice all the rows, keep all the rows, and let's slice from state all the way to school and see if this works. So that looks good. So it's state to school, so state all the columns between state and school, and included school. So that looks good. So let's do this again. Let's go from 1 to 3. Let's use integers and see here the third column is not included. So this grabs columns with index 1 and 2, which are simply state and height. So it looks like column selection is indeed working for us whenever we give it a slice. All right, so let's formally test this with test call slice. And it passed, so looks good. All right, so that is, we have completed subset selection, and we're going to move on to, actually we have one more small section on subset selection, and then we're going to move on to something else after that step.